Hey, how are you?
Hey, I am doing great. We went out last night and bought ourselves a pickup truck, and I feel like I have finally arrived in my country home. It feels great. That's it. That's
Oh,
that's my whole story.
congratulations.
Yeah,
That's it. Sometimes that's all you need.
right.
You have longed. I mean, the only thing that could possibly be better is if you got a Jeep, right?
Dude, now you're making me sad. Yes, you're right. I
Oh,
need a Jeep.
I'm, I'm just saying you have longed for a Jeep your whole life,
Yes.
but I'm not trying to compare. It's just, it's up there. I was trying to more put it in the pantheon of amazing cars that you have wanted for a very long time.
Yes. And I have always let the practical win. The practical is
Hmm.
it takes a long time to get to work. And so I need a fuel efficient vehicle. And so I haven't bought a truck. But it,
Yeah.
we have too many, again, the practical's winning. And that is we have too many projects that have stacked up because we don't have a truck. Now we have a truck. Now I have a lot of projects to do. So,
Now you have to justify the truck by actually doing the projects.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So,
Oh, that's funny.
great. Well, I went from happy to a Jeepless man with a lot of things on his to-do list. So that was great. How are you?
You're welcome. Speaking of the practical, I am doing great as well, actually. Yesterday, we had a project finally finished at our house that has needed to be done for several years, and I'm thrilled. I live in Missouri. It flash floods here all the time. Frequently, when it flash floods, it floods my garage, and it can flood my garage up to like 6 inches of water.
Oh,
So it's not like it's just like a little bit of water gets in my garage, like
yeah.
6 inches of water. That's a lot. And so we have a drainage system on our driveway that's designed to avoid this from happening, but it has been really just a mess. And it was a major job to get it fixed. And this week, I got guys out here. It's completely fixed. I am so happy that it is done.
Hmm. That is fantastic. That has got to feel so good.
Mostly. There's a little piece of me that keeps like that's wondering when the next massive flood is going to be and thinking, I wonder if it's really going to work. I mean, it sounds like a good plan what they said they were going to do. It certainly cost the amount of money that a good plan costs. I
Yeah.
saw them do lots and lots of work.
If it doesn't work, you know what you're going to wish you had?
What?
A Jeep.
Oh, yes. Far more than any of the cars we have. Our two electric cars certainly do not make me hope that my garage floods again at all.
You know, I just
But
realized that between you and me, we are a carbon neutral podcast. I appreciate that. Thank you
well,
for balancing me out.
yeah, yes, that's true. Just to make sure that the listeners know how far I go to make sure that I am being the responsible one in this relationship. Not only do we have two electric cars, but we have solar panels.
Oh,
I'm guessing you didn't call to talk about cars since this is
yeah.
definitely not that podcast.
No, I called to talk about the spiritual realm. Maybe that's the spiritual realm that is infecting my cars. Maybe I need to cast the demons out of my vehicles. Okay, so but seriously,
Oh, okay. I have to pause for a minute. Can I just take a second and tell a really funny story that segues these two realities?
oh my gosh, I can't believe that this triggered a story. Go ahead.
It really did. So this is way back when we all, you, us, everybody lived in Bolivar. And I me and Kristen were driving somewhere and we parked in one of these parking lots that it looks like it's a pull through spot, but it had it had the what are those things called at the head of a parking spot that stop you from doing that? The like concrete barriers that are
Yeah.
like 6 inches tall or something.
Curb.
Um, but it's like they put it there on purpose. It's not just a curb. But anyway, whatever it is, you know what I mean. So Kristen and I are going somewhere. I try to pull through a spot that has one of these and then another one to stop people from either side of the pull through spot. So then I was stuck because now I've got two of these things between my front tires and my back tires. And so you have to go back over it. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to keep going forward. So I pull forward. So now like I have like thunk 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 thunk. Oh, like it was, and we heard it hit the bottom of the car, and it was really bad. And we drove wherever we were driving, and the whole way there's this like clunk 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 noise happening underneath the car. I was like, oh great, I'm such an idiot. I drove over these stupid little barrier things, and now my car is clunking. And I was going to a very charismatic church at the time. And so I did what any good charismatic would do. When we got to the next place we were going, I like stopped the car. I genuinely got out of the car. I laid hands on the car and prayed over the car. And I am not kidding. It never made the noise again.
Okay, so this Baptist boy has never laid hands on his vehicles and prayed for them, and that's the problem.
I'm just saying it worked.
Okay. You charismatics are weird.
We are weird, but I think Jesus likes it a little bit.
Okay, well, I'm about to go quote unquote weird here as well, because the conversation I want to have around spirits and spiritual territorial spirits in particular is not one that we talk about very much, and I think on its surface is totally going to put me in the kooky Christian camp. But this is something you and I encountered many years ago when we read God at War by Greg Boyd. Do you remember this?
I do remember. Well, I mean, certainly I remember Greg Boyd, since he has been profoundly influential on our thinking. Um, but which part of Greg Boyd are we talking about?
Well, so to back up and give you some context here, our church is going through the book of Revelation, and so I am like reading Revelation like in advance of these sermons, and just looking ahead and thinking ahead. And I was reading in chapter 2, and this is where all of the letters to the churches start. Which one author says we shouldn't call them letters to the churches because the whole book of Revelation is the letter, and that these are just like individual messages to the churches, which, okay, I get. So maybe messages to the churches start in chapter 2. But every single message to the churches begins with the command to the angel of the church of Ephesus, or to the angel of the church of Pergamum, write. And you're writing this missive to the angel of this church. And what in the world does that mean? And as I look at different commentators, the different commentators are saying, well, this is not an angel, right? This is the personification of the church's spirit, right? So this is kind of just a way of saying the way that this church tends to be, which I think is dumb. Because every other time in the book of Revelation, the word angel means angel. And so some others have gone, well, the Greek word angelos does mean angel, but it can also be translated as messenger. And so maybe what this is saying is there's a human messenger that speaks on behalf of this church, or is assigned to speak for this church or to this church. So maybe we're writing to the head person of the church of Ephesus, and we should change that word from angel to messenger. And I'm going, why are we working so hard to deny the idea that this is potentially an actual angel that is in charge of that church. And this is something that Greg Boyd talked about at length. He argues that there are angels in charge of cities, countries, realms, right? Like there's this whole spiritual stratosphere that is in this unseen world that is in charge of different locales. And if Greg Boyd is right, and I've just kind of always bought the idea that he is, then it's really not hard for me to conceive of the idea that there is an angel assigned to a particular church or to a particular city in which that church resides. So anyway, there's the context. Have you kind of bought Greg Boyd's thinking in this respect? How do you take this idea in Revelation?
Yeah, this is fascinating to me. I think similar to what you mentioned earlier on, like when you first said this, ultimately, yes, I am going to go with it appears to me to be pretty obvious in Scripture that there are supernatural powers that have some sort of oversight over a particular geographic or cultural or social demarcation.
Yeah.
So it's I wouldn't and I'm very vague on how I'm going to word this because the Bible seems, for the quantity of words in the Bible, if this is an underlying sort of framework of reality, I find it to be intriguingly seldomly talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Right? Like I live in the kind of Pentecostal world where, generally speaking, people take this for granted rather than think it's weird. But if you talk about it too much, then you become weird. So
Okay. Well, I exist in a world where if you talk about this at all, you are weird.
exactly. Well, and I before we dive in here, let's get our cards on the table. My two greatest influences here. One is Greg Boyd, who you just mentioned, who I think of as a really wonderful blend of academic and practitioner. He's a pastor up in the Twin Cities area. He's pastored for years and years and years. He's actively tried to be influenced by a fairly wide range of thinkers, but had to live out that theology in everyday church life. And he has a range of thoughts, all of which are generally questionable by the church at large. And so, you're in most Orthodox conversations, you're not going to win by saying Greg Boyd says X.
No, in fact,
But
I brought up Greg Boyd the other day and somebody immediately countered with, "Oh, you just read Greg Boyd and Rob Bell, huh?" Like just immediately shot me down as like, "Oh, all you do is read heretics."
well, and Boyd has a range of interesting views. But nevertheless, I think his views are coming from places of authentic wrestling with, let's be holistically consistent with what the Bible is trying to say.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and
100%. And if I
in
could
this,
just pause for a moment, my pastor just quoted John Mark Comer the other day, who says, "Look, in every sermon I preach, 20% of what I say is heresy. The problem is I don't know which 20% that is." And I think that is true for Greg Boyd. I think that is true for me. I think that is true for everybody who wrestles with Scripture. They are going to honestly wrestle with this, and they're going to get a lot of things right, and they're going to get a lot of things wrong. And it's not really clear which is which.
exactly. But so, generally speaking, you captured what Boyd is trying to say. But then the other major impactor here for me is Frank Peretti, right? I mean,
Oh,
you can't,
yeah.
yeah, you can't be our age and not think of this present darkness and the
Oh,
way in
yeah.
which the there's for anyone who's not read this, it's telling the story of this town, but it's telling it in two ways. It's telling what is visible to the naked eye, but then it is also telling the sort of overlaid spiritual story of angels and demons, as if the angels and demons exist almost in an alternate sci-fi dimension kind of thing, or like they're ghosts that are present but not visible to the naked eye. And so the intersection of the natural and the supernatural really functions like it would in a sci-fi story or a fantasy story where there are ghosts or and like I said, an alternate dimension or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. In fact, one of the more formative images in my head from that book series is of so at by this point in the story, like things have really kind of come to a head. Like the angels and the demons are clashing pretty significantly over this small town and this small town church in particular. And an angel is looking down on the pastor of this small church. And what is this pastor doing? It's fascinating. This image is burned into my brain. The angel is looking down at this church and this pastor that is out in the lawn. He is mowing the lawn of this church. I picture him on a riding lawnmower. It's a little country church, and he is actively praying for the church and for the town. And honestly, that is like one of those formative images that says that is who I want to be. I want to be the guy actively praying against the evil spirits and the issues going on. Like, I don't know. That image sticks out from that book.
Absolutely. I don't remember that specific moment, but that sort of idea definitely captures what's going on in the book. And I feel like we need to like say, okay, what does the Bible say here? But before we do, as another person who has been profoundly influenced by Frank Peretti, have you ever heard of Mr. Henry?
No.
Okay, so when my kids were little, we often played for them goofy things from Christianity in the time that we were growing up, like Salty and the Singing Songbook kinds of things. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, one of the things we stumbled upon that I didn't listen to as a kid, but that I stumbled upon with my kids was this thing called Mr. Henry. So, I just want you to take a minute and Google and then click on the image search option, Mr. Henry Frank Peretti.
Okay, I'm there. I know nothing about this. This is so goofy.
For, the, for those of us who imagine this is like a Christian Sesame Street meets Blues Clues kind of thing
Yeah. Yeah.
from the 90s. And the main character, the only live action human being in the entire thing, is this guy named Mr. Henry, who is played by Frank Peretti, the author.
Wow.
And if either of my kids were ever to listen to this right now, I bet they could immediately burst into song the Mr. Henry theme song. Like, as a matter of fact, I mentioned to my daughter I was going to be talking about this, and she immediately, at almost 16 years old, immediately started singing the Mr. Henry theme song. I mean, this is a
Okay.
huge part of our story.
Okay, so this is shocking to me. This feels like learning like so Frank Peretti was kind of the Christian dark author, right? And so
Ah,
this is to me like learning that Stephen King was in an Adam Sandler movie. Like this is how this feels.
yes, no, it really is. Imagine if Stephen King ended up the main character in Blue's Clues. You'd be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Wait, you're telling what?
What are we going to find at the end of this episode, boys and girls?
It's going to be warm, fuzzy, and then everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay.
I love Frank Peretti's range, but we gotta okay. So with all of that silliness aside, it strikes me that if we're going to actually ask the question here, we got to jump in and say, what does the Bible say about this? When we ask that question, where is the first passage you think of?
So honestly, the first passage that I think of is in Daniel, because it is one of the clearest examples. There's a few others that I want to talk about as well, but this Daniel passage just seems to capture things so brilliantly. So this is Daniel 10, and this is a vision that God is giving to Daniel. And this is starting in verse, well, I'll pick it up in 13. It says, "The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision is for days yet to come." And so who is this prince of the kingdom of Persia? And who is Michael, one of the chief princes? This feels like heavenly beings, angels, if you will, that are warring over whether or not Daniel can proceed. Like, he was held back for 21 days, seemingly by an evil spirit, until Michael, another spirit, came and fought him off, and Daniel was able to proceed. So that's how I read this text. Now, obviously, you could think of this as a prince in like a genuine human prince, and Michael, another chief prince of some sort. But I feel like that's a harder read.
Yeah. I was looking at this passage as we were getting ready for this conversation too, and it is fascinating to me. Generally speaking, historically, pretty much everybody throughout church history understands this to be saying there is a ruling angel over a particular nation, Persia. Like, this is everybody from Jerome to Aquinas to Calvin. That's pretty much, they're all like, yeah, no, absolutely. That's clearly what this is saying. Nobody questioned it.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that the history of interpretation was so strong on that.
Yeah, and so let's put this in the context of the book of Daniel. The first half is largely narrative. The second half is largely, let's call it pre-apocalyptic, right?
Yeah.
A lot of apocalyptic literature is hearkening back to Daniel as the foundational piece of writing.
Right.
So
right.
This is like giving rise to apocalyptic literature as a way of looking at the supernatural world and understanding what's happening sort of behind the scenes.
Yes.
Which is
yes,
why
yes.
This is such an important text when we get to Revelation, by the way.
That's exactly right. Because
there is...
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, because what is the book of Revelation? Like, it is a revealing. It is a unveiling. It is a making known what is not obvious in normal everyday life. It is pulling back the curtain, if you will, to see behind. And so when you see this in Daniel and you see it in Revelation, you realize there is a whole spiritual dynamic happening that we do not acknowledge most days of the week. But it is happening behind the scenes, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And it takes these apocalyptic literature, apocalypse, revealing, this revealing literature to peel back the curtain and allow us to see it. So that's why I love this passage in Daniel and what's going on in Revelation so much. However, we know that the history of interpretation around Daniel and Revelation is wildly diverse. And so it's not as though these are the clearest, most concrete examples we could produce.
Absolutely. And so this is where when somebody sees into the supernatural, we at least have to acknowledge this is getting metaphorical. But my caveat to that is that metaphorical may be the best way of understanding it. And so I don't think the best thing to do with metaphors is to try to figure out what is the reality behind the metaphor, as if we can like take apart the metaphor, remove it, and then find the real thing, which is sometimes I think what we do with these passages. I think the more helpful thing to do is say, what is this metaphor trying to help me understand? And let me embrace that,
Yeah. Yeah.
as if the metaphor itself matters. Does that distinction make sense?
It
I don't know
totally
if I've
does.
ever said that out loud.
Well, you're exactly right. People try to say, well, okay, the metaphor doesn't mean what it seems to mean. It must mean something else. We have to deconstruct it in order to find that, which is not how metaphors work. In fact, we use metaphors without even thinking about it all the time. In fact, you used it in describing what we don't want people to do. Take it apart and put it back together. That's a metaphor. We're not physically unscrewing anything and putting it back together in some new shape or like there's no taking apart that's happening, but it is a way of understanding the deconstruction of an idea that just helps communicate what you're trying to say. Anyway, so that's just, we think in metaphors, we communicate in metaphors. We need to allow them to speak on their own terms.
Yes, exactly. And when I look at this metaphor, the things I walk away with are there are spiritual powers over areas of the world. And this, by the way, if I were to pull Daniel himself, the man from hundreds of years before Jesus, into a conversation and say, hey, I think you're alluding to the fact that there are spiritual powers that oversee particular nations, I would be hard pressed to believe he would do anything other than say, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? This is a profoundly polytheistic world in which there are supernatural realities that are worshipped in every nation around Daniel. Daniel is a very uh, he has a very broad view of the world because of his place. And so he knows about all these different cultures and different kind of religious ideas that are happening. And he doesn't think of them primarily as religious ideas. He thinks of them primarily as religious powers that are often behind thrones.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, in just to emphasize this polytheistic worldview, so one of the passages that is really challenging, my friend John and I, we recently translated Psalm 82, and Psalm 82 has this polytheistic worldview right there in it, and it's one of many examples throughout the Psalms. But it starts, I'm going to read my translation here. God takes his place in the divine assembly. Among the gods he judges. And then the accusation seems to be to these gods. How long will you defend the rights of the unjust? And how long will you raise up the faces of the wicked? Defend the rights of the helpless and the orphan. Do justice for the needy and the poor. And then you skip down to verse 6. I say to you, you are gods, and you are all sons of the Most High. However, like a human, you will die, and like one of the princes, you will fall. I mean, is there anything more clear in Scripture that we could point to that says there are these demigods, if you will, or we could call them angels, that are all beneath Yahweh himself. He is the most high God. He is the Lord of all lords. He is the King of all kings. He is the God above all gods. But that is not to deny the existence of these other spiritual beings who sometimes run afoul of God's intended design and purpose and justice. And that's, to me, it's just plain as day that that's what's happening in Psalm 82.
Yeah, and so I also was looking at this passage, and again, going back and looking at how do people interpret this one. What's mind-boggling to me, and I don't know what to do with this, this is also very consistently interpreted the exact same way throughout church history. Athanasius, Augustine, Calvin, but they all interpret this as primarily pointing to not angels or powers, but world governments. And I find that to be mind-boggling, except for perhaps my argument here would be that the pre-modern thinker does not distinguish between political and religious the way we do, and does in fact see a fusion of political power and religious power that is very foreign to us, particularly in the United States. And so anytime there's a political power, there's a supernatural power behind it. And they're not distinguishing between those things.
Well, right. And I think that you have that same concept happening in Revelation to the angel of the church of blah, 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 right. And so I think both Psalm 82 and Revelation are addressing the spiritual authorities that are integral to and influential of the human authorities of that same region that are in rebellion or disobedience. I think he's acknowledging them as wedded together, and it's not a one or the other. It is a both and.
Yes. And this is where I think our worldview splits things in a way that makes it complicated for us to even understand what that means in a really meaningful way. Because I think you're exactly right. I think we have three different categories in some ways. The spiritual powers in Daniel, if we have to divide between angels and demons, the Prince of Persia is a demon, right?
Right.
Here, they are neutral to negative. They have the capacity to judge rightly and the capacity to judge wrongly. They are not devoted to corruption, but they are judging wrongly. They are far freer than we would typically think of angels or demons as.
Yeah.
And then
We put angels and demons firmly in their individual camp. But yeah, you're right. This is neutral maybe, but also like more, I don't know,
morally
freer.
free.
Yeah, freer agents. Yeah.
Yes, they're free agents. Exactly. Again, hearkening back to Greg Boyd's language. And then the Revelation text, they are morally positive, right? They're clearly representatives of a church. And so if we look at that passage in Revelation, first of all, I think you're right. We have to do some serious theological gymnastics to make it not mean that there is some kind of supernatural power behind the church, like an angel.
Right.
Whatever else we can or can't say, we've got to say there are personal realities that have power that seem to be able to choose sides, but that sometimes it's not even about sides. Like here in this moment in Psalm 82, there aren't even sides. That's the thing that I feel like Peretti missed. These guys aren't picking sides. They have a job to do. It seems like a God-given job, and it just seems like they're doing it badly.
Yeah. Well, and we see some of these, we see some of this creep up in other passages as well, where again, it's not clear if they're quote on the good side or the bad side, or if they just simply exist as supernatural beings. So, like Psalm 103:21, praise Yahweh, all his heavenly hosts, you, his servants who do his will. Okay, so you, his servants who do his will, maybe that's angels, right? But then Job 1:6, this is fascinating. We know that Satan presents himself to God in the beginning of Job, and God says, hey, Satan, hey, have you considered my servant Job, right? We know that that's how that starts. But what we gloss over is this. Verse 6, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Who are the, what's this? Who are these gods? Like, what is happening here? And so we just get these weird glimpses that's like, are they good guys? Are they bad guys? Are they free agents and we still don't know what they're going to land on? Like, there's these weird glimpses that don't tell us a lot, but it does indicate that this realm exists and these powers are real.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, C.S. Lewis in That Hideous Strength, he has one of his characters say there were, well, there were neutrals knocking about. That is to say, kind of just there. And that's something we don't think of. But even Lewis was willing to admit, looking backwards on history, there were supernatural neutrals.
Hmm.
Huh. I find this fascinating.
Yeah, me too. I think, as I contemplate this and as we look to wrap things up, I'm thinking to myself, so what? What's the point of all this? Obviously, there's a lot here that points a particular direction, but that doesn't flesh it out very well. And so what's the value in this at all? And to me, the value is I need to constantly remind myself as a 21st century post-enlightenment rational thinker that humans are not the only actors on the stage, and that there is a whole spiritual world that is vying for my attention, my allegiance, my choices. And I need to engage that spiritual world, right? We have no problem saying that we serve Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we have no problem with the passages like in Acts 16 when Paul says, the Holy Spirit prevented us from going to such and such a place. We have no problem acknowledging that level of the spiritual world, but acknowledging a much wider level is hard for my brain. And I need these conversations to remind me that we're engaged in a battle. As Paul said, was it in Ephesians, our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers, the municipalities, all of those things, or principalities, not municipalities. Yeah, I need to be reminded of that. And this conversation helps me in that. Is that your takeaway from this, or do you have another layer here?
I think the other layer for me is that maybe the way to say it is that the world is always weirder than we think. Right? Like, just to be honest, like, the world is just weirder than we think. The supernatural realm is more complex. We have mental pictures of the supernatural world, and those mental pictures inform the way we think and process the universe, but they are partial at best and certainly flawed. And so, and this is my takeaway a lot of times when I'm thinking about theology or the Bible. I just want to say, I think we need to constantly be looking in the mirror to see our own perspective and then looking outside of ourselves to discover other perspectives so that we can be challenged and improved. Because there is always room for challenge and improvement.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been a super interesting conversation. There's so much more we could say and talk about here, but we, for the sake of time, should probably leave it here. And I actually want to invite the audience to fill out what remains. And what did we not get to here? What strikes you about this conversation? How do you tend to think about the spiritual realm? What do you make of this command in Revelation to write to the angel of the church of Ephesus or whatever other church? Yeah, what is your reaction here, and how do you interpret some of these passages that we've mentioned? We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Threads. Just look for On the Phone with Josh. We can't wait to hear from you.
I am super interested in that. So I look forward to it.
And I look forward to another great conversation again next week.
Yeah. I'll talk to you then, okay?
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.